Welcome back. Lots of developments in the controversy involving those documents seized from Mar-a-Lago a couple of weeks ago. We're learning more thanks to a Washington Post report. Let's talk about it right now with National Security Attorney Brad Moss, who's up late with me here on the Final Five. Brad, let's get right into it. We learned the contents of some of these documents by way of the Washington Post. What has changed and what has stayed the same in the last 24 hours or so?
So what certainly stayed the same is that as far as we can tell, there were a number of documents, both in that storage room at Mar-a-Lago and in the former president's personal office and in his personal desk that had classification markings on them. We know there's been this argument floating around on conservative punditry that they were declassified. We haven't seen anything along those lines yet. What has changed, obviously, is that this ruling came down on Labor Day about the idea of a special master, that there's someone who's going to review the documents seized 3 weeks ago and evaluate whether or not, one, attorney-client privilege is implicated for any of them, and there may be some, but two, more importantly, more controversially, if executive privilege can apply. And to be clear, there is precedent for the idea that a former president has the ability to invoke executive privilege. What there is not is any precedent explaining what, if anything, a former president could do to prevent a current executive branch from getting access to those documents. So it's unclear, even if this special master were to decide that these documents were implicated by executive privilege, it's not clear what basis in law the person would have to say, therefore, the FBI can't have access to them.
We've talked a lot about the judge, Aileen Cannon, in this case, and obviously the fact that she was put there by the former president. She was pushed by the Federalist Society, somebody who was seen as one of those peak judicial candidates that was put out there over the last couple of years. So does this effectively put a freeze on the investigation right now with these documents, that they can't be used for investigative purposes?
It throws a bit of a wrench into it. Certainly the national security risk assessment is continuing and ongoing, but the criminal side now has sort of a limitation on what it can do. They can't use the contents of these records. They certainly can investigate around the records. They could still, in theory, investigate the witnesses who would know why they were placed in different areas, why they were placed in the former president's personal office, to what extent they had been known about and identified in June when the former president's team said, we've given you everything, and obviously they had not. So there's still some ability for the FBI to investigate and to continue in various ways, but the substance, the meat of those documents is not accessible to the FBI at this moment, and probably won't be for at least a good 2 to 3 months.
So we've talked about these documents. We've seen the pictures. We know that they were in this desk, in this office, with passports, with magazines. And yet you have people like Marco Rubio saying this is more of a storage issue than it is a national security concern. When you look back at what the likes of Rubio said during the Hillary Clinton email scandal, you're hearing two different stories here.
Yeah, during the 2016 saga with Hillary's email server, it was the biggest threat to national security in history, and obviously now they're singing a different tune. That's politics to some extent. There were plenty of Democrats back then trying to gloss over the seriousness of what Hillary Clinton had done. But to be clear, the distinction between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is that for Hillary, there was what we call spillage. There was information that had been spilled into these unmarked, otherwise unclassified emails that was information that should have been classified. For Donald Trump, it's documents that are and remain properly marked as classified.
Yeah, and to be clear, in that instance, there were many statements made and many investigations that show there was a level of carelessness in how she handled that situation as well. But these are different matters at this point, as you just pointed out. On the idea of the special master, Friday's a big day, right? We're going to see some movement on that front between the DOJ and the Trump legal team.
Yeah, so Friday's the deadline for these two sides to reach an agreement on a potential special list of candidates to be the special master. It'll be interesting to see if they can even reach an agreement on any list, given the obvious political implications and the small pool of individuals who would not only be credentialed to address such a weighty issue of executive privilege, but will also have an existing security clearance, which would avoid, lengthy delays in the process, and was one of the criteria the government had set out when it had responded in court. So we'll see what comes out of that Friday. We'll see what the mandate is from Judge Cannon, how she wants the special master to address this. It's a lot of uncharted territory to be plowed here.
Do you think that when you bring this neutral party into the debate here, when you whether it be a former judge or whoever it may be with that security clearance, does this change any minds along the way where you do have this third party coming in and saying, okay, this is what we found, this is what was seized, and this is what is classified and what is protected by attorney-client privilege or anything like that?
It's going to be difficult to see how or what this person exactly is going to do, because there's no real semblance, there's no guidance, no case law that shows that even if they find some of these records are covered by executive privilege, what, if anything, this is supposed to happen to them other than they go back to the executive branch. They certainly aren't personal records at that point of the former president. They certainly would fall within the scope of things that should have been in the possession of the National Archives at a minimum.
All right. Brad Moss, I appreciate the insight on this, something that obviously you've followed very closely. So thanks for the expertise tonight. Good to see you.
Anytime.
And the Final Five is back right after this.